Hi, and welcome to part 2 of the basic principles of applied behavior analysis. In part 1, we talked about applied behavior analysis as a science of learning and looked at behavioral excesses and behavioral deficits. Then we also got into the third-term contingency, or the ABCs of applied behavior analysis, with the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. And then we dove into the consequence a little bit more, looking at positive reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. And now let's look at some everyday examples of these terms. So let's say you're at the grocery store and a child asks for candy at the grocery store. Then the parent decides to tell the child, no, you can't have the candy. And then the child decides to start to cry about the candy, starts to throw a little tantrum. And then the parent decides, okay, I'm going to give the candy to the child. Now as a result, the child cries more often when the parent tells the child no, that they can't have something. So what's going on? So everything we look at the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So we're looking at the behavior of the tantrum behavior. So what happened just before the tantrum behavior occurred? The mom said, no, you can't have the candy. And then the child engaged in one of these, gave a tantrum kind of behavior, started throwing down a little bit. And so then the parent decides, okay, here, you can have the candy, take the candy, right? And so what this is, after behavior occurred, there was the addition of a stimulus. And all that's going to do is probably increase the likelihood that that child's going to engage in that same behavior under the same conditions where the parent says, no, you can't have something. So that is positive reinforcement. And many times we use positive reinforcement to try to get skills and behaviors that we want to see, but it also can occur with some of the behaviors that we don't want to see. So it's still positive reinforcement. And so that's what's going on here. That's what the child learned. Under this particular condition, I behave this way, and I get this particular reinforcement. But there's more things going on here as well. The behavior of the tantrum behavior is not only behavior, it's also an antecedent condition for mom's behavior of giving the candy. And then what did that result in? That resulted in a pretty quiet child. So at first, the child was shocking mom's cage in the antecedent condition. Mom engages the behavior of giving the candy, and then that removes that shock. So that's the removal of the stimulus, negative. That's only going to increase the likelihood that mom's going to engage in that same behavior of giving the candy under the conditions that the child is screaming for the candy. So that's negative reinforcement. So the parent doesn't even understand that negative reinforcement might be going on here, but clearly negative reinforcement is going on. So this is kind of a note right here for all parents to know that the goal is not to turn off the behavior. Many families, many parents, and many families try to work to shut off the behavior, but that's not the goal. The goal is not to turn off the behavior. If a child is engaging in because they want a book, or they want the train, or they want the computer, or they want the iPad, and they're engaging in a lot of behavior, you could stop that behavior easily. Here, have the iPad. That's only going to increase the likelihood that they're going to engage in that behavior more in the future. So the goal is not to turn off the behavior. Don't find yourself working to try to turn off the behavior. The goal is to decrease the likelihood that that behavior will occur more in the future. So reduce the future frequency of that behavior. That's the goal. So there's also more going on here. So we're looking at the tantrum behavior again. And before the tantrum happened and before mom said no, the child asked, hey, can I have some candy? And then mom engaged the behavior of saying, no, you can't have the candy. And then what did that result in? That resulted in, of course, the consequence of, right? So that was the child gave an addition of a stimulus. That's positive, right? In the fact that it was addition of stimulus after mom's behavior of saying no. That's only going to decrease the likelihood that mom's going to engage in no behaviors. In fact, that's what a lot of tantrum behavior is for, is you said no to me, I'm going to put you in such an aversive condition that you're going to be less likely to engage in that behavior more in the future. You're going to think twice before you tell me no again. So there's a lot of things that's going on in even this one simple scenario of positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and even punishment behavior that's going on that we need to look at. So that's a good look at the four main terms that you might hear in the consequences: positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. There's also two other terms that we need to talk about in this section, and that would be what we call extinction and differential reinforcement. So let's look at those two terms. So extinction, well, the definition of extinction is a procedure in which the reinforcement is no longer delivered for a response that has been previously reinforced. So what does that mean? Basically, that means this, that we have three things. One, we have a behavior that's been previously reinforced. Two, we withhold that reinforcing consequence. And three, the result is the behavior will decrease over time. So for instance, you have history of going up to a soda machine and you engage the behavior of putting in your money, pushing the button, and your soda comes out. Your reinforcement is your soda, and your soda comes out. So every one time, in fact, usually, that you put your money in and you push the button, your soda comes out. But let's say you go to the soda machine, and there's one particular soda machine. You put your money in, you push the button, and nothing comes out. You're not going to stand there all day, continue to engage in the behavior, putting your money in, pushing the button, when you're not getting the reinforcement that you used to get. So extinction is going to take place. You might try one more time, right? Maybe I didn't put enough money in, but you're not going to stand there all day if you're not getting the same reinforcement that you used to get from standing in a soda machine. You're going to avoid that soda machine because it's not giving the reinforcement. That's extinction. But let's say you're in Las Vegas and you're at the slot machine and you're putting your money in and you pull the lever, right? It's not every one time that you pull the lever that your reinforcement comes out, that money falls out, right? It's on a variable ratio. It's on an intermittent schedule reinforcement. So it's about every 10 to 15 times that you pull that lever that they gave a little bit of money to keep you going and keep you gambling. So let's say that the slot machine ran out of money. It was not going to pay out. The bells and whistles were still going off. The lever still pulled. It still spun around. The lights still went on. The sound still went ding, 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 right? But it was never going to pay out, and you never knew it. With the soda machine, it would take one, maybe two times, and you're going to walk away. The slot machine, it's going to take you a lot longer to figure out that this slot machine is not going to pay out. It's going to take about 10, 11, 12, 13 times you decide, hey, this is gone cold. I'm going to move on to something else where extinction takes place. And so that's what we call a resistance to extinction. So there's three main characteristics of extinction. And the first would be resistance to extinction. So some behaviors are going to have a high resistance to extinction, like the slot machine, and some behaviors are going to have a relatively low resistance to extinction, like the soda machine. Another characteristic of extinction is the extinction burst. So it's important to know if you apply extinction, the behavior might get worse before it gets better. There's going to be an increase in the frequency or the duration or the intensity of a behavior before it eventually goes away. So it's important to know, because if that behavior gets reinforced in the extinction burst, well, then you have a problem. Let's say you decide, okay, your child is engaging in a lot of tantrum behaviors because they want the iPad. And you decide, well, I'm not going to give them the iPad for that behavior, right? I'm going to withhold that reinforcing consequence that they're going for, the reinforcement that they previously got for engaging tantrum behaviors where they previously have gotten the iPad. I'm going to withhold the iPad now and not give them the iPad for engaging in that tantrum behavior. So you're applying extinction. You're withholding that reinforcing consequence. But if they engage in more behavior because they're not getting the reinforcement that they used to get, they're going to engage in more behavior. They're going to engage in louder tantrum, longer tantrum, more intense tantrum. And if you give them the iPad during that more intense or during a lengthier period of time, all they learned is, oh, okay, that's what I need to do next time. That's how I get my iPad that quicker, is if I'm louder or if I last longer period of time. So you really need to be careful about the extinction burst and not reinforcing during the extinction burst. The third characteristic of extinction is spontaneous recovery, where a behavior goes on extinction. Somewhere down the line, you reinforce that behavior or someone else reinforces the behavior, and then it's back at its full capacity. So another concept we might utilize in applied behavior analysis is what we call differential reinforcement. So what is differential reinforcement? Well, we know what reinforcement is. Reinforcing a behavior we'd like to occur more in the future. Differential reinforcement suggests that there's something that we do not want to reinforce. So if we are putting a behavior on extinction or other reductive procedure, we want to be able to provide differential reinforcement of an alternative behavior. So let's say, for instance, you have a child that is engaging in tantrum behaviors because they want help with something. They have a history of when they're in the other room and they've come into a situation, let's say they're playing with their iPad and something's going wrong with their iPad and they need help. Their go-to move is to start to throw a tantrum, and the parent runs in and helps them with the iPad or helps them with whatever situation they need. So they're more likely now to engage in tantrum behaviors when they need help. And so you decide, I'm going to put that behavior on extinction. I'd rather that behavior not occur, that tantrum behavior occur more in the future. So I'm going to make sure that when they need help and they engage in the tantrum behavior that does not contact my reinforcement of running in the room and helping them with whatever they need. But you do want your child to ask for help and seek out help when they need help, but maybe not for that tantrum behavior. So we need to think of an alternative behavior. What's a more appropriate way my child can get that reinforcement instead of engaging in all that tantrum behavior? So we're going to provide differential reinforcement of an appropriate behavior, of coming and saying to you, hey, I need help. And then that behavior gets reinforced. Or even if it's signing for help. Or even if they come over and they tap on your shoulder and you provide them help. That would be differential reinforcement of an alternative behavior. So that completes our look at consequences here in the three-term contingency, where we looked at positive reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment. We also talked about extinction and differential reinforcement. In the next video, we're going to head over to antecedents, and we're going to look at stimulus control.